Well, welcome to the 700 Club. U.S. embassies in the Middle East are evacuating non-essential personnel. The State Department order came after Iran issued a threat to U.S. forces in the region.
In Gaza, workers from a humanitarian aid group were brutally attacked by Hamas. Chris Mitchell has more from Jerusalem.
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation released a statement saying Hamas targeted their workers. On Wednesday night, Hamas brutally attacked a bus carrying more than 24 members of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's team. What we know is devastating. At least 8 fatalities, multiple injuries, and fears that some of our team members may have been taken hostage. GHF says the workers were Palestinians working to deliver critical aid to needy Gazans. Since its operation began, the organization has delivered nearly 19 million meals. It's calling on the international community to condemn the attack, which they call a crime against humanity. Senator James Lankford posted on X called it the ultimate sign of Hamas's oppression against their own people. Tensions are high in the region overall. The U.S. State Department has ordered the departure of all non-essential personnel from U.S. embassies in Baghdad, Bahrain, and Kuwait due to unrest. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized the voluntary departure of military dependents from locations across the region. Speaking at the Kennedy Center in Washington, President Trump said they are being moved out because it could be a dangerous place, and we'll see what happens. Iran's defense minister said he hopes nuclear talks will yield results, but if not, he warned the U.S. that all its bases are within our reach. We will have access to them, and we will target all of them in the host countries without hesitation. While the 6th round of talks are being scheduled for this Sunday in Oman, Trump is expressing skepticism about whether a deal can be reached. On the podcast, Pod Force One, Trump stated,
I'm getting more and more less confident about it. They seem to be delaying, and I think that's a shame, but I'm less confident now than I would have been a couple of months ago. Something happened to them.
Jonathan Conricus of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies believes the time for diplomacy passed long ago.
After 15 years of diplomatic efforts and with unequivocal evidence that the Iranians are lying and they are trying to build a nuclear bomb, action needs to be taken.
Israel reports it's recovered the bodies of 2 more hostages in Gaza, including Yair Yaakov, who was killed in Hamas's brutal October 7th invasion of Israel. Meanwhile, Israel's Knesset voted down a bill that would collapse the government. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, it looks like we're getting ready to go to war, and that is a very serious matter. And the evacuation of the embassy personnel is in advance of that. From my point of view, it's about time that we awaken to the ideology behind the Iranian regime. They've been after us since they started in the 1970s, and I'm old enough to remember the hostages from our embassy and how tragic that was and how ineffective the Carter administration was in trying to either negotiate their release or send in special forces to evacuate them. It's about time we awaken to it. Here's something that many people don't know about Islam. Under the tenets of that religion, it is perfectly okay to lie and deceive infidels. It's permitted, and not just permitted, but encouraged. So when you see Iran on the public stage saying we just want peaceful nuclear energy, it's okay for them to lie on that stage because they're secretly developing nuclear weapons. It's permitted. It's okay for Hamas to claim atrocities by Israel, that these rocket attacks that they launched against their own hospital, or what we just saw, where they murdered fellow Palestinians in order to stop the distribution of humanitarian aid. Why? Because they wanted to control it. They wanted to sell it and get more money for more weapons to attack Israel. That's why it's okay for them to say from the river to the sea, and nobody called them, well, that's calling for genocide. And it's okay for them to label Israel a genocide state when all Israel is doing is defending itself from these horrific rocket attacks and the October 7th attack. They're more than willing to lie to us and deceive us in order to gain their ultimate end. The ideology hasn't changed. They want to completely occupy Israel. They don't want Israel to exist anymore. They've said that for decades. It's about time we believe them. And in that declaration, in that ideology, if they ever get a nuclear weapon, they will use it, and they will use it first against Tel Aviv. Well, in other news, the protests against immigration raids in Los Angeles are spreading to more cities. Ephraim Graham has that story and more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Ephraim?
Gordon, President Trump has deployed thousands of National Guard troops and Marines to L.A. Today, a federal judge will hear arguments in California Governor Gavin Newsom's court challenge to the president's move. Meanwhile, the impact is also being felt right here in Washington. CBN's Michelle London has the latest.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass issued a strong plea to the city.
We all stand in support and solidarity and call for the raids to end.
The sixth night in a row of civil unrest for parts of the downtown area. Protesters seen running as officers mounted on horseback move in, clearing the streets, enforcing another night of curfews. More than 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines standing guard on the streets of L.A. Wednesday night, as anger over the Trump administration's immigration crackdown and the deployment of federal troops to L.A. now boils over into other major U.S. cities. From Baltimore to Chicago, where a car drove through a group of demonstrators. In Seattle, protesters seen clashing with police. Meanwhile, a mixture of cheers and boos for the president Wednesday night. When arriving at the Kennedy Center in the nation's capital, he defended his decision to deploy National Guard troops and Marines in Los Angeles.
If I didn't act quickly on that, Los Angeles would be burning to the ground right now.
Anybody who breaks the law, anybody who assaults police officers, anybody who destroys property should be held accountable to the full extent of the law.
Tensions also reached Capitol Hill between lawmakers Wednesday as Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and other Democrats criticized the president's decision. And Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries addressed the recent destruction.
At the same time, we respect the right and should embrace the right for any American to peacefully protest.
Republican Senator John Barrasso called the L.A. clashes a threat to safety, then condemned Schumer and L.A.'s leaders for describing the demonstrations as peaceful.
California governor, Los Angeles mayor, call them out, Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass, unable and unwilling to restore the law. They refuse.
The Trump administration warning a military response may not be limited to Los Angeles, saying protesters in other cities could be met with equal or greater force. After learning about a planned protest in his state of Texas for June 14th, Republican Governor Greg Abbott says he's planning to deploy National Guard members across the state to, quote, ensure peace and order if needed. Michelle London, CBN News, Washington.
On Capitol Hill, senators continue to negotiate portions of the president's big, beautiful bill. One of those items is a 10-year moratorium preventing states from regulating artificial intelligence. As AI technology races ahead, there is concern this lack of oversight could be dangerous. Dale Hurd is on this story.
Not only has a bipartisan coalition of 260 state lawmakers urged Congress to remove the 10-year freeze, polling shows a solid majority of Americans also oppose the moratorium, which would cancel current laws and prevent states from enacting new AI laws. Many ask why it's even in the bill that's already passed the House and is now before the Senate. The answer appears to be deep concern that too much regulation will help China win the AI competition. The White House doesn't want states creating regulatory headaches when it's racing China for AI supremacy. This is what one tech CEO said after California AI legislation was vetoed last year.
Regulating at the state level means that we're going to have many different inputs into regulation, and we'll have an uneven playing field for companies trying to innovate in AI. This would have slowed us down. I'd far rather see legislation at the federal or even the international level.
We're in a race with China and other countries on this. If we smother this thing with regulation and stop the innovation, we could do real harm for the national security interests of the country. And that's the thought behind this.
However, Chris McKenzie with Americans for Responsible Innovation, which is leading the opposition to the 10-year moratorium, says it's too long and overly broad.
It would actually strike down laws not just regulating AI transparency and developer risks, transparency for consumers, children's safety online. New concerns, new risks, new alarm bells can go off on AI within that decade. And state lawmakers, who are often the most responsive, their hands would be tied.
State lawmakers have good reason to fear that an unregulated AI sector would put Americans in danger. Cybersecurity expert Neil O'Farrell.
AI is a different beast. It's not human, but it is capable of outwitting us in ways that we're not quite ready for.
OpenAI's latest ChatGPT model ignored instructions to turn itself off and sabotaged a shutdown mechanism in order to keep running. Another AI model has also shown the ability to deceive and potentially blackmail humans when ordered to shut down. House Energy and Commerce Chair Brett Guthrie said Wednesday that the 10-year ban is not likely to pass in its current form.
We're not suggesting preempting 50 state laws with nothing. We're going to have federal guardrails.
And it faces other hurdles, according to CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Michelle London.
Well, one potential obstacle is that this provision isn't budget related. And in order for Republicans to pass this mega bill on their own, a special Senate rule requires all provisions be directly tied to the budget. While there is GOP opposition in both houses, including Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and Senator Josh Hawley, Texas Senator Ted Cruz says he would introduce it in a separate package if it is removed from this current legislation.
Some are also concerned the proposed ban comes after President Trump signed an executive order calling for the federal government to share data across agencies and using a private data analysis firm, raising fears it could lead to greater government surveillance power. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
We continue to learn more about this detail with this budget bill with each passing day. Gordon?
Well, there's a lot in the big, beautiful bill, and from my point of view, a lot of that is not so beautiful. Whether it was the tax provision that nonprofits have to pay a special tax for providing parking for their employees, to this one, and this one should make every American very concerned. Just look at the track record of Congress trying to legislate in the internet age. Here's a fact you may not know. The citizens of China have more data protection than the citizens of America. That is, to me, shocking. Europe has a right to be forgotten, a right for you to say, please eliminate everything about me online. And we've seen, whether it's swatting or targeting of minors, all of these things happening, and everyone warning new parents, never put a picture of your child up on the internet. All of these things have gone unregulated by our Congress. And you can look at the political divide. They can't come to agreement on it. There's still on the books this prohibition about video rental companies that's now being applied to internet, and it just makes no sense. And they're not having the regulatory authority established in order to protect average citizens. When you add AI to that, talk about explosive lack of information that will be on every American. And then if the federal government is creating a centralized database where everything from your military record to your health record, whatever you've used for Medicare, Medicaid, your Social Security record, and then anything in the FBI, all of that in a central database, well, that is a surveillance culture. And AI looking through that database to establish patterns, well, for me, that's a very disturbing future I don't want to see that future, but I'm not seeing the U.S. government, Congress coming to any kind of deal. At the very least, can we pass the Blade Runner law, which means if AI is being used or AI is appearing, generating videos or pictures, that it needs to be disclosed to people so they know that they're not looking at something that's real. That for me is a basic. But what does it mean to be an individual citizen in a database country where everything you've ever done online is searchable and available and unregulated? That is very concerning to me. That is Orwellian. And we seem to be walking into it without any guardrails and without any legislation. So to have within the bill that the states can't act and a 10-year moratorium on that, it might be better to let the states come to agreement, states where they actually can get along and come up with policies that the federal government can then look at and say, is that something good for the entire nation? That's the federal system that's been in place since the founding of our republic. It needs to stay in place.